Once upon a time, there was a man named Solomon who built a mighty temple. But before long, the people of Judah turned away from God and began to worship foreign gods and idols. One day, God allowed the Babylonians to attack Judah and destroy the whole city, including God's temple. The people of Judah remained in captivity until one day, God raised up the prophet Haggai to inspire the people to get back to work, saying the time is now.
Hey, good morning. How are we doing this morning? Man, I am excited for our first experience in here in 2020. Whether you're joining us here, man, we got an awesome looking crowd, good looking faces out there today. And I'm flattering you. You see that? You know, I'm trying to butter you up as we get into today, make you a little bit more participative. But no, I'm excited. Whether you're here live or joining us on Facebook Live, man, I'm excited that you're here hanging out with us as we get into this first experience of the year. And this time of year is very common for people to begin to make those New Year's resolutions, to look back at their last year and the things that they didn't maybe accomplish that they thought that they were going to, or some things that they want to do different in the new year as we look and we reflect on how this plan is going to be different for us in 2020. This plan that we make for our life is going to be different than it was last year. You know, some of those most common things that people decide that they're going to do is maybe they're going to live healthier, add a few more years to their life, eat better, exercise more, lose some weight. You know, they're going to go down that path. Or sometimes people are like, man, my money didn't quite end up like I wanted to, so this year I'm going to make a budget and I'm actually going to stick to my budget. I'm going to spend those money. Or we might focus on our relationships that we have with other people. We might say, you know what, I'm really going to be a better friend than I was last year. I'm going to be a better spouse than I was last year. Or we might just need to work on that relationship with Jesus and say, you know, I'm going to make sure I do a devotional or read my Bible every day or whatever it is. But we set these plans and these goals in our life going into the new year. But all too often, that's all they are is plans and goals, right? Because, you know, we make it to February and we forgot whatever that was we were doing. We moved on. I was looking up some stuff. I kind of wanted to know what the most common amount of time somebody keeps a resolution for. And they said the day that most people end up leaving it is by January 17th. So you got a couple weeks left to continue to work on that. And then you can go ahead and move on. But, you know, this story reminds me of the story in the Old Testament that we're actually going to start looking at over the next few weeks. And, you know, one thing about the Old Testament, I was never really digging it that much. Like, for a lot of years, like growing up, I just read a whole bunch of he behalf thou and thou behalf had. And I didn't even understand the words that were in it. So it wasn't really that interesting to me. But in the past few years, as I've really kind of read it and just stopped and thought about it for what it was, man, it paints some of the most awesome pictures, I think, as we look at that. And one reason I really like it is because the people that it talks about, they're just regular, ordinary people like we are. And even though this stuff happened 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, these are people just living life, doing things, and it can still speak to us today. I think those stories that we find in the Old Testament, you know, can be so much relatable to us, even though these people didn't have Instagram and internet and electricity, and their lives were so much different. They all dealt with the same problems that we all are dealing with still today. So as we think about New Year's Eve and as we think about these resolutions and these things that we're going to do and change about ourselves, we're starting this new series called The Time Is Now. And, you know, whenever I think about the goals that we set for us, I think about these people in the book of Haggai that it talks about. I'm probably going to say it Haggai are both acceptable pronunciations of it, but I'm used to calling it Haggai. So we're going to spend the next few weeks in this book as we look at these people in the book of Haggai. It's a really short book in the Bible. If you want to grab your Bibles, you can turn there now. You probably don't even know where it is. It's only 2 chapters, and we usually look right past it, so that's okay. I'll give you a little bit of you know, placement. It's right between Zephaniah and Zebediah, okay? So you can find it. You know, thank God for you version. I actually was having this conversation a little bit this morning, and Eric like, hey, I got my phone, you know. Like we're so thankful. All you got to do is H-A-G-G, and man, it's going to pop right up. But we'll have them on your screen. We'll have them in your talk notes as well, too. I was just teasing a little bit because we often just breeze past these little books that are at the end of the Old Testament, but they have so much good information in them and so many great stories. So we're going to kind of go through this story of the book of Haggai over the next 3 weeks. And so I'm going to catch you up a little bit with where we are when the book actually starts. You know, kind of give you the Cliff Note version of the prequel leading up to the beginning of this book. So it was during the fourth year of King Solomon's rule. And King Solomon had decided that he was going to build this magnificent temple for God. It was just going to be huge and glorious and amazing. And so this temple was going to be more beautiful than anything that was ever built. This place where God could come and dwell and the people could come and worship him. And he builds this temple. But after King Solomon died, the people kind of forgot to be worshiping God, and they kind of started worshiping idols a little bit. You know, they didn't have that king, that reminder that we should go to the temple and worship God. So anyway, God allows this series of events to take place to speak to these people that have started to worship idols. And there's some notes in the very top of your notes today that just kind of run through a few of these highlights of these events as I kind of run through them real quick to catch you up with where we are. So in 587 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar and his armies crushed the southern kingdom of Judea, destroying the temple. So they went through and destroyed the whole town. They took over the city, but that wasn't enough, man. They had to add insult to injury, and they destroyed this temple that King Solomon had built. So here are these people, and the next thing that happens is after this temple is destroyed, these Jews are taken into captivity for decades, and specifically 5 decades, 50 years, that they're taken into captivity. And I think when we think about that idea of being in captivity for 50 years, we kind of just blow by that. I mean, read these stories about people being in captivity for hundreds and thousands of years, and you think, 50 years, it's not that big of a deal. But I kind of want to put it in modern day terms, just to think about what that would be like to be in captivity for 50 years. I'm not 50 years old. I'm 45 years old. And if I think back to my youth, whenever I was born in the 70s, there was this thing going on called the Cold War, and I'll kind of just brush by it really quick. The idea behind it is there's this Soviet Union, and they have nuclear warheads, and they're going to be able to attack us, and they're going to turn us communist. And that was the belief that people had, although probably wasn't true, but still we're going to play along with that idea of time as far as when that was going on. So if we think about what might have happened if the Soviet Union came and said, hey, you know what? We are going to destroy 5 of your largest cities in the United States with these nuclear warheads. And on top of that, we're going to destroy 10 of the largest cities of your allies if you don't surrender to us. And so the government kind of gets together and they're like, this is not going to turn out good. It's going to be global thermonuclear war. The whole world's going to be destroyed. So we have no choice other than to go ahead and surrender to the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union takes us captive as a nation. We're no longer to do what we want and worship how we want and go where we want. We have to follow their rules, their laws, whatever they set for us. That would be how we would live. And this would happen before I was even born. So I would have been born into captivity. I would have lived my entire life in captivity. My children would have been born into captivity. So I say that 50 years doesn't seem like a long time when you're reading it, but when you think about it, man, I feel like I've been on this earth a whole long time. And we still wouldn't be at that point where I would have passed that captivity that I would have been kept in. So after 50 years of being in this place of captivity that is kind of the worst conditions that you would ever want to be as a country, something amazing happens. And you can't imagine the relief that they had. In 538 BC, about 50,000 people were allowed to travel back to Jerusalem, to the capital of Judea, to rebuild. Finally, after 5 decades. And after 5 decades of being in captivity, after 50 years, after generations were born and possibly died, and other ones were born, and people, they finally got to go back. And one thing they were so excited to do was rebuild this temple that was destroyed, because this temple was a pretty big deal to them. So they had heard stories about it, and some of them weren't alive at the time, but they had grown up hearing these stories about this beautiful temple, and they were excited about going and rebuilding that temple. But then they got the foundation built, and they got the altar built, and then something happened. See, they started to kind of face some oppression from the Samaritans. And all of a sudden they thought, oh no, this just got hard, man. This got hard, so this probably isn't God's will for us to do right now. It's not easy, so it's not where we should probably be doing. So that's pretty much the backstory of what goes on there. So for 14 years, these people didn't work on the temple. For 14 years, this place that they had wanted to get to for 50 years, they got the little bit of suppression and they're like, well, we're done, we're going to stop. So what did they do whenever they stopped working on the temple? Well, they started building their own houses because that was easier. You know, whenever I'm building the temple, it must not be God's idea because I'm getting oppressed by the Samaritans. So God doesn't want us to do that. So we're going to go work on and build our own houses. They started building their own houses and they forgot about God's house. So what God did is he raises up this prophet, Haggai, to come and talk to the people and get them to rebuild this temple for God. All right, so that's where we are leading up to the very beginning of the book of Haggai. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, say, yeah, I got it. Makes sense? Okay. If it doesn't make sense to you, sorry, I'm moving on anyway. I got other stuff to talk about today. But that just gets us to where we are right now at the beginning of the book of Haggai. So we're going to start off in Haggai chapter 1, verse 2. And I want to show you in this verse, I think this is an awesome, there's a lot of humor in this verse as we read it. And I'm going to explain that as we get to it. So anyway, it starts off, it says, this is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say, the time has not yet come to rebuild the Lord's house. These people, those are the words I want to focus on. These people. And the reason I kind of find that funny is because if you look back at the Old Testament, almost every time that God refers to his people, he calls them my people. He said, my people do this, my people do that. What God is doing here is the same thing I do to my wife when my kids do something crazy, right? I'm like, your kids did this. You won't believe what your daughter did. You won't believe what your son said to me. And I say that because my kids are perfect, right? You know, my kids don't do anything wrong. But her kids, on the other hand, her kids are crazy hellions, I tell you. But anyway, no, I'm just kidding. But I think it's so funny that God says these people, and he doesn't call them my people. These people say the time is not now to build my temple. Well, why did they say that? Well, they said that because they faced just a little bit of opposition. The Samaritans came along, and they're like, this is hard. This is hard. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. But see, what we got to understand is when things get hard, when things get difficult, when there's opposition in our way, it's not because God doesn't want you to do that, but many times it's because you're doing what God wants you to do. That opposition that comes your way is because something is trying to stop you because you're following the path. The things that God asks you to do aren't always going to be easy. They're not always going to be perfect. There's going to be difficulties along the way. So what we have to do is we have to find ourselves being obedient to God. Find those things that he's challenging us to do and be obedient in those things. I want to encourage you with this simple thought in the very beginning here. It's one of the simplest thoughts, but I bring it up because it's when things are challenging and when things are hard and when things are difficult, sometimes it's a lot easier not to do what we know we're supposed to do, but it becomes easier to not do the right thing. So if you're taking notes, it goes like this. We have to choose the hard right over the easy wrong. We've got to choose the hard right over the easy wrong. With God's help, we can choose that hard right over the easy wrong. That's my prayer for us as we go through and we look at these things that we may have had as New Year's resolutions this year, things that we want to do or change about ourselves. Because a lot of times when we get to January 17th, we're going to realize this is hard. This is hard. I can't do this. This is hard. I can't take care of this. So we choose that easy wrong over the hard right. Because it's hard to build a temple, right? You know, it's hard when somebody hurts your feelings to forgive them as Christ forgave you. You know what's right, we know what's right, but do we do what's right or do we do what's easy? It's a lot easier to spend more money than you have means coming in, but it's hard to stick to a budget. It's hard to pay off your debt. It's really hard to be generous with your money because you have extra left around. It's so easy to give up. It's so easy to not work on making a difference. But as followers of Jesus, we have to choose that hard right over the easy wrong. And this is essentially what the prophet Haggai is going to empower these people to do. He's essentially telling them that the time is now. The time is now to choose the hard right over the easy wrong that you've been choosing. So as we go through the rest of today and we talk about the rest of the story, I want you to just think about the rest of the story maybe a little bit differently as you think about what is it that God is telling you today is the thing that I've been called to do. I mean, it could be something in your New Year's resolution. It could be something that you didn't do last year. It could be something like these people that for 14 years they were supposed to rebuild this temple and they didn't do. For 14 years, they didn't take care of what they knew God wanted them to do. They knew God called them to do, but they didn't do it. And so I want you to just think about that as we read the rest of this story. For you, it might be, that you're supposed to share your faith with somebody, that God has put somebody specifically on your heart to share your faith with. But man, it's a whole lot easier not to do that because I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know what they're going to do, man. And whenever I bring that up, it's a whole lot easier to just be quiet about it. Maybe you're supposed to honor God with your body and get healthier so you can live longer and have longer with your family so you eat better, exercise. But man, it is so hard to focus on what I'm eating and count my calories and get out there and exercise and do things. Maybe you're supposed to be serving somewhere in the church. Maybe you are serving in the church and you're supposed to be serving somewhere different. But, it's not comfortable to go serve in that new place. I don't know how to do that. I don't know, where I'm supposed to go with those things. Maybe you're supposed to give something to somebody. Maybe you're supposed to start journaling. Maybe you're supposed to write a book. Maybe you're supposed to get involved in some connect group. I don't know what it is for you, but whatever it is that God's been calling you to do, whatever it is that that God's been saying to you, hey, this is right, but it's hard. And so we've chose the easy wrong thing over the hard right thing. And think about that today as we finish out the story that we're talking about this week. And for some of you guys, I'm truly hoping that God is just going to speak to you during today's message and say, hey, man, the time is now. The time is now to quit thinking about that thing that I've been telling you to do for so many years. So let's continue reading on in this story through verses 3 through 5. And this is what happened. When the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai, is it a time for yourselves to be living in paneled houses? Well, this house, God is saying, my house, this house is in ruins. Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. And we're going to see God say that a lot as we read through other verses today in this same story. Give careful thought to your ways. Think about how you're living. Is it time for you to live in paneled houses? Well, my house isn't ruined. Well, what's a paneled house even, A paneled house at the time would be a house that's considered, extremely elaborate, a very, very, very nice house. If you look at today's standards, it'd be like granite countertops and shiplap walls and something that Chip and Joanna came over to your house and made for you, It'd be something just incredibly crazy. And I want you to understand this. God is not against you having nice things. God is against you putting nice things in front of God. He doesn't care. He wants you to have nice things. But he doesn't want nice things to have you. He doesn't want that to be in front of him in your life. So at this point, these people are putting their own comfort over him. And that's why God is saying you need to be here building my temple. So this brings the question for you. Are you putting your comfort over your calling that God has for your life? Are you trying to make a name for yourself, or are you trying to make a difference? Is there something that you're putting ahead of God? Are you putting your house in front of building his temple? Give careful thought to your ways. God wants us to choose that hard right over the easy wrong. For some of you right now, there's something in your life that that you're supposed to do, that God has called you to do. But we've chosen to take that easy wrong way because it's a lot easier to do. And as we keep going on in this story, I want to look at this next verse, and I want you to just think about as you have in your mind or your heart this thing that God is calling you to do. I love how this story, like I was talking about some other stories earlier in the Old Testament, these people lived 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Jesus was even born. But as I read this next verse, I think that there's a lot of parts in here where I look at it and I think, man, that's exactly the same way that I feel. These people that lived all that time ago, they feel exactly the same way as I do right now. So we're going to pick up in verse 6 here. It says, you have planted much, but harvest little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You put on clothes and you're not warm. You earn wages, but you put them in a purse with holes in it. So the modern day version of this verse would go something like this. You're working your tail off all the time, but you feel like you don't have anything. You're pouring your life into some career, but yet at the end of the day, you still feel empty when you get done. You have more right now than you've ever had before in your life, but it's not making you happy. You do all the things you're supposed to do. You go to concerts, you go to movies, you go to sports events, you go eat out all the time. But no matter how much of that you do, you still feel like there's something missing. You're doing all the things that are supposed to make you feel happy, but yet you still feel empty. Give careful thought to your ways. Are you putting your house ahead of God's house? So as we continue on with the story and we look at this next statement that God makes, I want to just talk about for a second how truly loving God is as he makes this statement. See, God sometimes gives us the simplest advice and we don't get it. He just breaks it down as the simplest form that he possibly can, and we just don't hear or understand that. So here's the people. We're going to build this temple. We feel like we should build this temple. Oh no, the Samaritans are oppressing us. We're not supposed to build the temple anymore, and so they stop. For years and years they stop. And watch how loving God is in this next statement. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. He says this again. He says, go up to the mountains, bring down the timber, and build my house, so that I may take pleasure and be honored. See how simple the statement is that he makes? Go up to the temple, or go up to the mountain, bring down the timber, and build my house. There's some blanks in your notes there for you to write down the super simple statement of go up to the mountains, bring down the timber, and build my house. See, I think we don't get that sometimes. We don't get that simplicity of go up to the mountains, bring down the timber, and build my house. Because it's so simple. God is just saying, hey, y'all are sitting here telling me that the time isn't right to do this, that the time isn't now to do this. But I'm telling you it's as easy as this. God's saying, I'm going to show you. You go up to the mountain, right? Just go up to the mountain. That's all you got to do. You got to bring down the timber, okay? Bring down the timber. And then you got to build my house. Just like that. 3 simple steps. 1, 2, 3. We're like, okay, go up to the mountain, God. Okay, oh man, that mountain's big. I can't go up to the mountain. Bring down the timber. Oh, that's hard to bring down the timber. I don't know. Build your temple. God, what's 4, 5, and 6? Okay, I got 1, 2, and 3. Thank you. What's 4, 5, and 6? And he's like, what do you mean? You're not even going to do step 1. See, God gives us this plan, step by step by step. And we're too busy trying to figure out what 4, 5, and 6 is. What's the blessing on the other side, God? What are you going to do for me? What am I going to get out of this? What do I get from this, God? That we won't even do step 1. And God's just like, hey, I'm not going to give you 4, 5, and 6. What did I tell you to do? I told you to go up the mountain. You haven't done that yet. I told you to bring down the timber. You haven't done that yet. I told you to build my house. See, when we listen to God and we're obedient to God, we have no idea the blessings that can be on the other end of that. Because we're too busy trying to figure out what the end result of this is, we don't listen to God to do the very first step. We want the details. We want to know. Let me tell you this. If God gave you the details of what 4, 5, and 6 were, there's a good chance you wouldn't do 1, 2, and 3. Because you might not want the outcome that's going to come on the end of that. But the blessing that's going to come on that side is going to be so huge. Step by step by step. He gives us the simplest instruction and direction. And yet, we don't want to follow those first simple, easy steps. Man, I want to get in better shape this year. I really do, man. I want to get in better shape. Okay. Start eating healthy. Exercise. Get plenty of sleep. It's that easy. Man, I really want to get out of debt this year. It's hurting me so bad, this debt. Okay. Spend less money than you make. Start to pay off your debt. Make a budget and stick to it. It's simple and easy. But we don't want to do steps 1, 2, and 3. We just want the end result of what happens with that. You know, I really want to have a better marriage, man. My marriage isn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to become great things in 2019, and it never did. Okay. It's that easy. Humble yourself. Apologize for the things that you've done wrong, and put your spouse's needs in front of yours. It's that simple, step by step. It's all we have to do. It's all there. So how do we get there? Man, I'm going to give you the most prophetic, simplest advice that you have heard 100 times in your life, but are we really following it? The way to get started is to quit talking and to start doing. Quit talking about the things that we need to do. Quit thinking about the things that we need to do. It's that simple. Go up to the mountain. We need to talk about going up to the mountain. We don't need to say, oh, I know I'm supposed to go up to the mountain, but I don't have time to go up to the mountain right now. We just start doing it. It's easy to do the wrong thing. It's easy to not do what you know God is calling you to do and what you're supposed to do. But to choose the hard right, the way to do that is to just stop talking about it and start doing it. Maybe you're supposed to reach out to somebody that has hurt you and you think, well, I don't know how they're going to respond to me, man. I don't. Hey, guess what? That ain't your problem. Your problem is to be obedient to God. That's your purpose. Their response, that's in God's hands. You don't have to worry about that. Our purpose is to just be obedient. We have to do in our life what we know is the hard right and not the easy wrong. You know, maybe you're living with some type of sin that you've been hiding away. And man, it's so much easier to just hide that away and not show that to anybody and not go get help for that. Or maybe you've got that fake marriage that we're talking about where you pretend like you're happy. Maybe you pretend like you're happy to other people. Maybe you even pretend like you're happy with your spouse. But you know inside, you're just burying stuff down that's just building up inside of you. And you just got to stop and say, hey, you know what? The hard right thing to do is just to sit down and say, you know, we need help. We need counseling. We need to talk to somebody. Man, I don't want to see this end. But right now, it's just not what it's supposed to be. You know, maybe you're called to serve somewhere in church or serve in a different position that you've been in. The easy thing to do is just to do what's comfortable, to do what you know, to do what you're capable of doing because you've been doing it forever. But the hard right thing is to do what God's called you to do and find out where you're supposed to serve, whether it's here or maybe it's outside of here. Maybe you're supposed to be involved in some type of connect group or whatever. I mean, I know we don't have official connect groups right now, but we're still meeting every week. We truly believe that God has called us not to meet on just Sunday, but to meet throughout the week. And we can hook you up with that, even though there's not some formal Bible study or bowling class or whatever. Man, if God is calling you for community with other Christians right now, man, go see Eric or Perry after the experience. And man, we'll get you hooked up. We'll put you on a list. We'll call you. You'll be going out to dinner with us, and you'll be coming over, and you'll be moving stuff in the back of a truck every Saturday. Whatever it is, man, we do life together, you know. But it's that community with other Christians that's so imperative and important. If God is calling you to do that, whatever it is that God is calling you to do, the time is now. Stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. We just got to start doing it. Go up to the mountain, bring down the timber, and build my house. It's that simple, but we make it so complex. Now I pray for you guys as we close out today. Man, Father God, thank you so much for this word that you've left us, this Bible, these stories that you've left us, these people that lived thousands of years ago, but yet their stories can just mirror the lives that we currently live right now. Lord, thank you specifically for this story in the book of Haggai of these people that put their own comfort in front of what you wanted them to do, and that we could hear that story and understand truly that, God, you're calling many of us here in this room today. You're calling many of us to do something amazing for you, to be obedient to you. But we're sitting here looking at that saying, man, it's too hard. God, I just pray that you would continue to help reveal these things to us that you've given us and you've put on our heart, and we just say, it's too hard. It's easier to not do it. It's easier to slide by. It's easier to just slip under the radar than it is to truly do the hard right thing that you want us to do. And Lord, I hope that you would just continue to put that in our heart and speak to us and just give us those simple steps. Hey, allow us to just have the comfort, and we don't have to figure out what step 5, 6, 7, and 10 are. We just got to do step 1. We know what step 1 is, but we're scared to do step 1. Lord, I just pray that you would just give us the confidence and the comfort and the encouragement to go out there and stop talking about what you want us to do. Stop talking about changing the community. Stop talking about what we want to do differently. And you really could truly be in us, working through us, and we would start being people of action, Lord. Lord, I'm excited for what you have to come for us. I'm excited to be obedient to you in what you're calling me to do throughout the rest of this year and the rest of my life, Lord. I pray all this in your glorious, glorious name.